Chapter 2, the Revolution, the Articles of Confederation, and the Constitution. Let's consider the role of the Constitution in America. Take flag burning. The majority of Americans would be happy to ban flag burning. It's been banned by states and by the national government. But the Constitution protects it at free speech. In both Texas versus Gregory Lee Johnson and the Eichmann case in the national courts, the courts have held that the burning of flags is protected free speech. Gregory Lee Johnson was involved with both of them. It's an unusual case. His main political concern seemed to be being angry about things, but he did have his day of fame. He was also famous for carrying around the severed head of a pig as some kind of metaphor. So basically, the people don't have to like what he stands for, but the law protects him. The Constitution. The Constitution is a nation's basic law. It creates political institutions, assigns or divides powers in government, and often provides certain guarantees to citizens. It sets the broad rules of the game. So let's be clear though, the rules are not neutral. Some participants and policy options have advantages others don't. For instance, according to traditional democratic theory, if you vote, you have an advantage in getting what you want. According to elite and class theory, if you are Exxon, you have an advantage in getting what you want. Okay, we could go back as far as we want to start the great story of America. I like those Ice Age movies, but that blue stuff here is not ice for Mammoth Ray Romano to follow. So pragmatically, we should probably start with the end of the French and Indian War. Life wasn't bad in the colonies in the 1700s. The colonists were freer, more equal, more prosperous than most people in Europe. But the French and Indian War led to tensions. While the British won, they were saddled with a huge war debt. And to prevent further conflict with the Indians, they passed the Proclamation of 1763. And to pay off the war debt, more taxes. So now the colonists can't go settle out west, and they have to pay these taxes. In other words, as we say in America, I want to do what I want. And what we wanted to do was rebel. Initially, the Declaration was just a list of reasons to fight, a polemic. We didn't bash monarchy as a theory because we needed French support. So we just list all the way the King of England was out to get the colonists, such as inciting merciless Indian savages against us. Today, it's studied more for its philosophy. If Thomas Jefferson was the father of the Declaration, John Locke was the grandfather of the Declaration, kind of like Neil Young is the grandfather of grunge, or Dr. Dre led to Snoop Dogg, which led to Eminem, whatever. Locke's thumbprint is all over the Declaration. In particular, we see the ideas of natural rights of life, liberty, and property, the concept of the consent of the governed, and a desire for limited government. It's important to note that ours was a conservative revolution. The colonists just wanted rights of representation that they felt had been taken away from them. It's not like the colonists ran around executing people as happened with the French and Russian revolutions. So we fight the revolution with much help from the French. For instance, 3/4 of the troops at the final major colonial victory at Yorktown were French. Also, a story I'm going to have a link to in the page here is the way that Washington used the dangerous practice of smallpox inoculation to protect his army from the epidemic that ravaged the U.S. during the Revolutionary War. Perhaps a key to victory, as legends assert that the British tried to use biological warfare. I have my own theories about exactly why we won the American Revolution, but the Board of Education says I have to teach it the old boring way. But look at this totally historically accurate painting. Look closely and you can see little details that suggest maybe there was more to our victory than Washington's genius, French help, and home court advantage. The Articles of Confederation was our first government. It was based on a very weak one-house legislative branch, and most of the power was given to the states. Congress could raise armies but couldn't pay for them. The national government could only raise taxes with the pretty please method. States ran their own commerce and trading policies and could print their own money. Meanwhile, the states were becoming increasingly democratic and supportive of the middle class, but perhaps at a cost to our nation's economy. Consider this chart. Note that the wealthy lost a great deal of control in the state legislatures. The shift is more noticeable in the North. Likewise, there was a shift from power being controlled by merchants and lawyers to the less prosperous farmers. The new nation's economy was struggling. The states could print their own currencies, and a lot of the states were creating inflation in an attempt to pay off war debt. A crisis grew between the farmers and the banks as farmers had more and more difficulty paying their debts. Foreclosures loomed. As the economic crisis threatened everyone, debate raged. The farmers favored inflation as it was easier to pay off their debts. The banks favored a more stable currency as it helped their profits. The state legislatures, which were more and more controlled by middle-class farmers, passed force acts. These forced the bankers to accept the weak, inflated currency which the banks hated. At first, the farmers' attacks on the banks and judges were more personal. Consider our photo here, which seems to suggest that throttling in a shallow ditch was the worst of it. Sort of an ill-tempered Occupy Wall Street crowd. Lots of throttling and probably some tarring and feathering or running out of town on a rail. None of which was pleasant, but might have been more humiliation than torture. But real combat broke out. And while combat deaths were minimal, it threatened our nation's elite leaders. Congress couldn't afford to raise an army, so the wealthy coastal bankers footed the bill. Jefferson didn't mind this conflict. The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. It's natural manure, said Thomas Jefferson. George Washington, Gouverneur Morris of Pennsylvania, and other more conservative leaders were not so sanguine. Conservatism and strong government would return to the U.S., and Jefferson, by the way, would not be invited to the Constitutional Convention. Oh, vocab word of the day? Throttling is vigorously shaking someone by the collar. So they met at Annapolis to plan a meeting to have another meeting. If it sounds like a Dilbert cartoon or some commentary on middle management, I won't disagree with you, but it did lead to the Constitutional Convention. The meeting was an attempt to discuss changes to the Articles of Confederation. It was attended by only 12 delegates from 5 states, and it called for a meeting in May 1787 to further discuss changes. So this is as good a time as any for our intermission. You could go get some food. Maybe go get a soda. Yeah, I'm just messing around with the features of the thing right now. Why don't you skip ahead to the next slide? Later. Who were these